In the last installment of this series, we overviewed the entire fleet of the SD40 type locomotives and every variant that was rostered by the Kansas City Southern. Today we are going to be covering the successors of this model, the SD50 and the SD60. Welcome back to our series What Once Was, a dive into what railroads of North Louisiana and its surrounding regions were like in past eras. Before getting started, I want to give credit to the original photographers and videographers. All credit details will be listed in the description down below. Without them, my generation of rail fans would have a much tougher time of imagining what our areas looked like before our time. For those familiar with the recent fallen flag, you know that the KCS was a very loyal customer to the Electro Motor Division, with the vast majority of their fleet being manufactured by them until the late 90s and early 2000s. Following the massive success of the SD40 series, EMD was eager to introduce its newest product. The locomotive manufacturing industry had been controlled by EMD since the dawn of the diesel era, though General Electric had been consistently rising up in the industry. Thanks to successful locomotives such as the -7 series, GE was on pace to become EMD's equal and then later overtake the throne of first place. GE locomotives were offering higher horsepower and had more modern technology compared to the SD40's. Despite this, the KCS was impressed enough with them to only purchase from EMD for the next 2 decades. The railroad would purchase 10 EMD SD50's within the year of manufacturing, numbered 704 and 713. These 10 motors would faithfully serve the railroad in various duties, but many remember these units in their white paint, acting as manned helper units for coal trains over the tough grades of Rich Mountain. The SD50's would respond to GE's recent success with upgraded horsepower of 3,500 with its updated V16 645 engine. Resistors for dynamic brakes were moved to the front of the compartments to soothe maintenance. Unfortunately though, the engine upgrade along with the various other technical improvements would prove to be a detriment to the locomotive. While rail crews praised some of the improvements over the previous SD40's, they were shadowed by the abundance of complaints and mechanical issues. I know that I've mentioned this in multiple videos in the past, but the SD50 truly was the turning point in the locomotive industry. The SD50 hurt the reputation of EMD and greatly affected their sales of later models, which those lost as sales would go directly to General Electric. While these would be the only SD50's bought directly from the builder, more of the series would wind up on the roster. Many years after production of the model had ceased in the early 2000s, KCS would purchase 25 units second-hand from CSX. These were all originally Conrail and would be numbered in the 7000 series. While some roads such as CSX or Norfolk Southern would elect to rebuild their fleet of SD50's, KCS felt that the units were no longer necessary in the fleet. They would sell much of the fleet to LTEX, where many would be scrapped. I'm not sure if any of these are still around in storage at the LTEX facilities, but if there are, the odds of preservation may as well be zero. Following the SD50's would be the EMD SD60's. The list of changes between models isn't a long one, but there were some significant ones. While I mentioned earlier the SD50's were powered by the 645 prime mover, the SD60's would be the first to sport the 710 prime mover. The SD60 would also have several different variants, such as the SD60M or SD60i. KCS would only purchase the standard model. The railroad would purchase 46 total locomotives, and they would be numbered number 714 through number 759, right where the SD50 numbers left off. The fleet of SD60's would stick around for a while and eventually were transferred to KCSM down south of the border in Mexico. The engines would be renumbered into the 3800 series. A few more years would pass and they would too have the same fate of their SD50 predecessors, sold to the highest bidder. Some have been lost as a scrapper's torch, but as of October 2023, multiple of them are listed for sale on Sterling Rail's website. Hopefully one day these motors will receive a second chance, but we won't know until it happens. I hope you've enjoyed this quick video overviewing the fleet of SD50's and 60's. Along with the SD40's, these standard cab 6-axle EMDs were simply the look of the KCS before GE took over their market. While I have memories of these units in service as a kid, I never got to document them except for maybe a handful of times, so I'm definitely grateful for those who came before me to capture these images. Well, as always my friends, I'll be seeing you somewhere out there along the rails, and until the next time, thanks for watching.